Good day and welcome to Psych Sense, where we make sense of mental health. I'm Ken Mallon, your host, and today we're talking about autism. I'm here in the beautiful ndnu campus, sporting my ndnu gear, and shortly I'll be joined by my classmate, Terrinice Hayes, and she's going to share her real-life experiences working with children who have autism. Before we talk about all the great work she's been doing with children, I want to explain very briefly what it is. Clinically, we refer to autism as Autism Spectrum Disorder. Now, ASD, as it's also known as, is usually diagnosed in early childhood when caregivers notice a child either having great difficulty or in some cases being unable to interact verbally and socially with others. People with ASD sometimes seem to be in their own world. They may exhibit repetitive behaviors as well as limited interests or activities. That's a very clinical definition, but we're very fortunate to have Terrinice with us here today, and she's going to talk to us about what she actually sees in real life. So, Terrinice, I'm going to invite you to just come and sit down here.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome. Now, you're a behavioral therapist. You spend time every week with children who have autism spectrum disorder.
Yes, I do.
And you've been working the last 9 months, I think you've told me, mostly in social and home settings with children who have ASD. And so the first thing I want to ask you is just what kind of interests you about ASD?
What interests me most of all is, I guess, the communication techniques that different children use who have autism spectrum disorder.
Interesting.
So my job basically, as an ABA therapist, is to kind of bridge that gap between them and the social world by using different techniques through behavioral psychology.
Oh, interesting. So you're kind of saying that they want to communicate, but they just don't have it, and you're helping them make that jump.
Exactly. They just have their own different ways of viewing the world and communicating.
So when you're working with these children, what are some of the things that you do to try to help?
We look at observable behaviors, so different things like maybe, yelling or screaming. It happens a lot. And we basically use positive reinforcement of desired behaviors, like, maybe the screaming was because they wanted a snack from mom and dad. So instead of screaming, we reward them for saying, "I want a snack, mom."
I see.
Just simple example, but like expanding it throughout that, yeah.
So you mentioned screaming and some of these other behaviors. What are some of the core standard behaviors that you might see? You say, "Oh yeah, that person has ASD."
Definitely if you're in the same room with them and they're just not interested in anything that's happening, it's really hard to get their attention. What I've seen with most of my kids is kind of fixation on certain things. Like, I had a kid who was really interested in Legos, and he would just take me throughout his room and just show me all of his Lego sets, and most of them are Star Wars, and he knows everything about every Star Wars movie, and I just find it amazing that he was able to take in all that information at such a young age.
Yeah, I volunteered at a school for the gifted for a while, and it was interesting that there are actually several children in that classroom who had autism spectrum disorder, and one of them actually ended up placing nationally in one of the GOPs. So is it a common misperception that people with autism spectrum disorder have a learning deficit?
I think it is a really common misconception that they have a learning deficit. Like I said, it's just forms of communication, but as far as academics, they're no different than any other child.
Now, have you found these behavioral techniques to be successful, and can you maybe go into some details about a success story that you're maybe the most proud of?
Yeah, like I said, I've been working ABA for 9 months. I had this one kid, he was one of my first cases. I would be in the same room as him, and it would be really, really hard to get his attention for a sustained amount of times, and he wouldn't really talk to me. But through our work, I remember about a month and a half, 2 months ago, he actually picked up a toy and looked at me and said, "Terrinice, look." And
wow. So you saw that social interaction?
Yes, that social interaction, and it wasn't there before, and we've made huge leaps and bounds. It's just so cool to be in the same room as him and having back and forth conversations and interacting through toys and play and stuff like that. So it's been really fun.
Wow, that seems like great progress. That must make you feel good when you can see that.
It's really rewarding work.
So thanks a lot for sharing that story and other experiences. If you had any final advice to parents who think their child might have ASD, what would you advise them?
Do your research. There is tons of it out there, and there are tons of resources that they can use. You're going to be your child's biggest advocate through this.
So what are some of the resources that are available to them?
Well, of course, you can start with your pediatrician. If your child is in school, talk to their educators, and they can have their own learning plan designed around this disorder.
So if you're interested in learning more about ASD or you have more questions, I am going to put a link in the description below and you can check that out. And with that, thank you for joining us, Terrinice.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Psych Sense, where we make sense of mental health. I'm Ken Mallon, your host, and we'll see you next time.